I'm excited today. Today's gonna be a good day. I'm excited because we're talking about Blazor, and Blazor's pretty cool. So I'm gonna hop right into it. First, I'm gonna start with some introductions. Obviously, my name is Brian Lagunas. I host the office hours, and of course, if you're not familiar with office hours, or this is your first one that you're attending, office hours is all about giving you direct access to the people that actually write the products you use every day. So this is your opportunity to engage directly with the team. You're not going through sales, you're not going through marketing. These are engineers, these are developers that you will be talking to one-on-one. So let us have your feedback, tell us what you think, and we're also here to show you the cool stuff we've been working on. On this call, I also have Graham Murray. Graham, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Graham. I'm a product architect here at Infragistics, and I work on a lot of our translation stuff and and a lot of our data visualization components and grids. And lately, I've been working on some of the stuff that Brian's going to show you today. We've been sort of, germinating all of this Blazor stuff, and you'll hopefully we'll get some official release bits to you as soon as we can.
Oh yes. Oh, trust me, you will want to hear this. This is good stuff. I have a number of Infragistics employees in the room who are also listening and hopefully will help me monitor the chat since I am no longer on my dual system at home. I'm actually at headquarters in New Jersey right now. I left the comfort of my home in Boise, Idaho to be with the team, and I'm having a great time. So let's start off. Recent releases. Well, if you follow Infragistics, know much about what we do, you know that we have not released a Blazor component product until now. That's right. Right now, at this very moment, on Nougat, if you search for Infragistics.Blazor, you have access to all of the Blazor components I'm going to be talking to you about today. So nougat.org/packages/Infragistics.Blazor. Go ahead and start using them. However, I am giving you a very strong warning. These are preview bits. And when I mean preview, I mean like hot off the press, like the build is still building type stuff. The code churn is still happening. This means do not use this in production, please, because it is not supported. If you call me and say, Brian, there's a bug, I know there's a bug. I know it. I'm telling you there's going to be bugs. So don't try to use this in production, but I do want you to go play with it. I do want your feedback. I want to know what you think. Also, like I said, there will be bugs, so expect them. And most things won't work. I'm going to tell you right now, things will not work. We are still working on these features. We're still trying to get this ready for release. Now we'll talk more about when that RTM will occur. There's no documentation. There's no samples, and use at your own risk. So as long as we are very clear on that point, you can now write Blazor apps using our components. So what components are we shipping? We're shipping 10 components initially. This is our initial release. We're going to have a ton of data visualization. This is our bullet graph, category chart, a data grid, which right now the name is live grid. So if you define this, when you declare this in your HTML and your Blazor app, it's going to be called live grid, but that name will change. We don't know what it is yet, but it's not going to be live grid. We have donut chart, a financial chart, linear gauge. We have a map control, a geographic map, pie chart, radio gauge, and a sparkline component. So as you can see, we are not focusing our efforts in those little dinky little buttons and check boxes and like all these little stupid little editors or anything. No, we're focused on the hardcore, very difficult data visualization and grids because we want to provide the enormous amount of value that we can with our initial release. Okay, we'll get to that all little tinker stuff later. Okay, so getting started is pretty simple. First, you're going to create your Blazor project. It's going to be either a client side or a server side. Just so you're clear on the status of Blazor now, so Blazor has two modes. We have a client side model and we have a server side model. The server side model uses ASP.NET, right? So that's .NET Core 3 now, and it's RTM. Now on the client side of Blazor, that's the WebAssembly portion, and that is still in preview for Microsoft. So just keep that in mind when you're creating your projects, okay? The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to add the Infragistics.Blazor NuGet package to your project. And then you're going to need to add this script. In this case, it's an example of a server-based file, but in the host CS HTML file, right above the blazor.server.js script, you're going to add this script for the Infragistics.blazor components, okay? Now, I do want to kind of hop out to a simple sample that I've created. And let me hop to this link, actually. I want to open this up. So if you look on NuGet, on our NuGet package, look under documentation, you'll see this show more button. Click on that, and there is a link to a GitHub repo with a very simple sample that I put together to kind of give you an idea of how these controls work, how you would define them, how you bind data to them, right? So I have that application running here. So I'm just going to run this right quick, and then we'll kind of look at the code really fast. I'll do this quickly since you have access to this code and you can run this locally. And then we're going to open up the chat and we'll open up the mic for questions. This is going to be your chance to interact with us, ask questions, kind of help influence our backlog, make some requests, things like that. So let me wait for this app to load here. And this is a slow laptop, just so you know. Blazor is really not this slow. Okay, so first off, we have our data grid component. This thing is smoking fast, okay? I have 100,000 records in this grid right now, 100,000 in a Blazor app. And this thing, I like to call this ludicrous speed. We're scrolling at ludicrous speed, right? Look at how smooth and fast that is. And it doesn't matter. You're only limited at the size of the message you can send to the server to populate this grid with your data. The size of your data is what you're limited at. If you can get 1 million records in your data packet, then we'll display 1 million records and it won't matter. It's going to scroll the same. I don't have a ton of columns in this, but it doesn't matter how many columns you have either. It's going to scroll vertically just as well as it does horizontally. It's freaking awesome, right? Of course, we have our category chart. All kinds of different chart types that you can change to: column, line, area, point, step, spline, waterfall, all that cool stuff. We have a financial chart. So if you're in the financial services vertical, this might be of interest to you. This doesn't show off all the features we have, but you have the sample. You can start turning features on. We have all the call out layers. We have your crosshairs. We have your final values, right? You can change the indicators, such if you want, like, what's one popular one? Bollinger Bands is a popular one. You can change your line types from line to bar, the candlestick, right? It's a financial chart. It does everything you would expect a financial chart to do, but probably better than the ones you've seen in the public now. And then we have a donut chart. And the cool thing about our donut chart is it's not only a single ring, but you can do multiple rings in your donut visualization. Of course, we have a pie chart and a spark line. You can actually embed the spark line into the grid. We have a template column in the grid, so that's a really cool demo to have. Bullet graph, linear gauge, a radial gauge, and of course, our geographic map, right? So we use a number of tiles here. Is this one using OpenStreetMaps?
Yeah, that's using OpenStreetMaps. You can do Bing and
Esri. Bing, Esri, OpenStreetMaps.
Yeah, obviously, this one isn't showing it, but various visualizations on top of the map as well as the tiles. So.
Right, and then after office hours, I'll throw some more samples in here because I actually use this sample myself to play around with. So I'll be populating with more data and testing it out and having fun. And so if you just want to star this repo or fork it, you can stay up to date with all the changes I make. Okay, so let's kind of look at the code here. So here I have a server-side sample that we're looking at. So if I open up my pages, the first step you'll need to do, of course, after you add the NuGet package, is for the server side, you're going to have to add this script. Do not forget to add this script or it will not work. So this is extremely important. That might be a little small. Let me, can I do a Control Plus? Is that all? I thought it was Control Plus. I guess not. Let me zoom that in. That's probably a little better for you there. So yeah, do not forget to add this script to your index, if you will. In this case, it's the host file. So if you look, for example, I don't know, what do you guys want to look at? You want to look at like the data grid? Data is kind of cool. Like I said, this is a live grid right now. The name will change. But for now, to play with it, use the live grid. Most of our controls have what's called a data source property. So that's all you have to do. So what I have here is I have a simple service, a grid data service that I'm injecting, right, using the Blazor dependency injection. If you want to take a look at that service, it's under the services folder, and we can open up the grid data service. And I'm just creating 100,000 random items. That's not fancy at all. We're not doing anything async, right? I'm just doing it quick and dirty just to get some data in there. And then we simply inject that service. Now, when you use services, make sure you go into your startup, and under configure services, you have to register your service with the iService collection. So I have all the services in the sample registered: the category chart service, the stock service, chart item, and the grid data service. So all the controls in here that use any type of data will bind to one of these services. So when you open up these Razor pages, you'll see the service injected. So make sure you look at that. And of course, feel free to bring in your own data, bring in your own services, play with these things. Let us know what you think. Another popular one is our financial chart. Like I said, nothing fancy. We inject our stock service and we bind our data source. As you can see, getting started with these controls are very simple. The APIs are very simple, and we do that on purpose. Now, a more complicated example, if you want to look at, would be maybe the radial gauge, where we actually provide a number of custom radial gauge ranges with some values, right? You can kind of see how things can get a little more advanced. A good way, because there's no documentation, actually, let me show you this. A good way to get started is if you go to the Infragistics samples on the React samples, or Angular, doesn't matter, or WPF. If you're using any of our WPF or Angular components or React components, these are the same controls. These have the same API. So for example, if we're going to go look at the radial gauge that we're looking at now, you can just about copy and paste this code and make minor changes, like capitalizing the property names, getting rid of the prefixes, right? Things like that, making sure you have your quotes instead of these curly braces. So you can actually copy and paste this code and just make some small changes, or just use this as your documentation on the features that we provide, the enums that are available to you. Like, use this as your documentation. We will make sure we create nice docs that are specific to Blazor and its implementation. But for now, since we don't have that yet, just use docs from a different platform, because it's the same controls. That's one of the benefits of using a company like us. The controls you use on one platform, it's going to be the same controls on another platform. You don't have to learn anything new. So let's go back to the slides really quick, because I want to kind of talk about our roadmap and looking ahead. So right now for our roadmap, we are targeting a March, April timeframe for release, around there. Maybe it might be more of April-ish, to make these RTM, to where everything's ready. You have all your docs, all your samples, no bugs, right? Everything's high and tight, looking sharp, beautiful, all the styling's there. So we're kind of targeting that March, April timeframe. Another thing I want to do with this product is I want to make sure we're continuous delivery. So when we are RTM, I want to be able to push, CI builds for new features to our NuGet feed. That way, if you need a feature, if there's something that needs to be fixed, you can get it immediately, and you're not waiting, for the next major release. You'll be able to iteratively update, like you would expect to do on NuGet. Just packages are constantly updated. So that's where we want to get. That's where we're going to get with this. Also, now would be your opportunity to start typing into the chat window things you want, things you're looking forward to having in a Blazor application. Like, what do you need? Do you need combo boxes? Is the built-in combo box not good enough? Do you need list boxes? Do you need switches and check? What do you need from us? So when you say, you know what, Infragistics is my control vendor of choice, I'm going to go all in with them. What do I need them to create for me to be successful? So in the chat, start throwing all your ideas out. I'm going to actually, now's a great time. I'm done with my portion. Okay, so what I want you to do, I'm going to go ahead and open up the chat here. You can unmute your mic if you want, and we can start having a conversation. I'll answer any messages that I may have missed while I was talking. So like Greg here, do you have a private NuGet feed on the Infragistics site? Yes. So when we RTM, we have a private NuGet feed, and actually the best documentation for this is actually, do I have, let's go, is our WPF docs. We have a great topic on our feed. And I'm just going to go to controls. Nope, not controls. Getting started. Documentation. I'm going to paste this link into the chat window, and this explains. Oh, feeds. Wrong one right there. Feeds. This explains what happens when you install our product. When you install our product, we add a local NuGet feed for you automatically. If for some reason it's not added automatically, you can create it manually. We step you through that. And then we show you how to add a NuGet source for our authenticated customer feed here, the packages.infragistics.com, right? So I'm going to go ahead and paste that link in so you can read about that. All right. So I see a multi-column combo box. I see a modern property grid. Modern. What's modern mean to you? Just a property grid that looks good? Is that what you mean? Or modern, like it has some features that the old one didn't have? I don't know. Tree grid. So if you have questions, feel free. Don't be shy. I'm gonna be quiet just for a second so you can ask some questions. Go for it. Knock yourself out.
Hey, Brian.
Okay. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, good. Yeah. So in the work that I've done already, when I want to make something really nice, I use the WPF packages, and then I utilize the WPF control configurator to draw out my screen, or configure my control, and then that has all the properties in the XAML that gets emitted, and then it's just a matter of doing a little bit of translation. But that's one way to leverage the configurator tooling, at least for now, to help people with really cool looking controls.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, Carl, that's a great point. Thanks for bringing it up. We have what's called control configurators for our WPF product. So let me actually bring that up. So for example, I don't know, I'll bring up the radial gauge because I just clicked on it first. Actually, let's do data grid because it has a more involved UI. Essentially, if you're using our WPF product in XAML, you can use the light bulb suggestion when you select the grid to pop up this designer, which gives you this WYSIWYG experience to where you can bind to sample data. It allows you to basically configure the complete control just by clicking buttons. And then when you hit save and apply, it generates all the code for you in XAML automatically. Now, we do want to do the same thing for these Blazor components. We just need to make sure that our controls are top notch before we start investing in the tooling. Once we have all the APIs, solid and frozen, and we know we're not making tons of changes, then we might start looking into creating the control configurators for these components so you get that same experience.
Hey, Tom. So just to answer you verbally here, since that'll be a bit easier. Yeah, your question is about JS interop in Blazor. And yeah, first of all, you don't actually need to use JS interop for maybe like 99% of the scenarios with our components, because yeah, we do have these native C# Blazor APIs that you're talking to. Under the covers, it's you're talking to our zero dependency web components, as I was referring to. But yeah, you don't actually need to do any JS interop to interact with them at all. It's as if you're just talking to C# things. But yeah, when you do JS interop stuff in Blazor, like say you had to reach in and talk to a DOM element or something like that, you had to like find a span and set its text or something. Then yeah, when you're doing JS interop stuff in Blazor, that's async. They force you to do that asynchronously. And the interesting reason why is that, as Brian alluded to earlier, there's actually two application models in Blazor. There's a client-side model and a server-side model. In the client-side model, you're compiling all your C# and it's running as WebAssembly in the browser. And then when you're doing JS interop from the WebAssembly, it's sort of reaching out to the JavaScript land in the browser and manipulating the DOM and doing stuff there. But in the server side, all of your C# code is actually running on the server, as part of your, say, ASP.NET Core app or something like that. And then it's communicating over the network with the JavaScript code that's running in the browser. And so in order to enable transparently there being these two different modes that your app is operating in, either the C# is running inside the browser or it's running on the server, they had to make all the interactions between your C# code and the JavaScript code be asynchronous, because there might be this long-running web interaction that's happening between your C# code and manipulating the DOM or running a specific piece of JavaScript. And so that's why that stuff is asynchronous. But generally, when you're using our components, you don't have to be aware of any of that stuff going on, because you're, say, just setting the properties on our components. Say you're setting the color of a series in the chart to be red. You just set the property to be red, and all of that stuff happens under the covers, and you're never aware of it going on. But the one place where you may need to deal with some of that asynchronous nature is that, say, you're calling a method on one of our components. And traditionally, like, methods on our components, like, say you want to know, hey, chart, tell me based on this population value, where that value would fit on the chart. I want to know where that sits on the chart, because I want to hover a piece of content on top of it or something like that. So in these more rare cases where you're trying to call a method on one of our components, those need to now be asynchronous in Blazor, because, again, that code might be running on the server, interacting with the component running in the client, and so that's why some of that stuff becomes asynchronous now rather than synchronous. But generally, you should almost never have to talk to the JS interop directly to use our components. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
Is there theme support?
We don't have any theme support currently. That's obviously something that we'll be looking into. You can any visual look and feel aspect of these components is entirely controllable through the API. So you can certainly apply a dark theme just by setting a bunch of properties, for example. But yeah, we don't have built-in support for, like, a single property theme replace or something like that.
Do we support any type of CSS in Blazor now?
You can use the CSS that would impact our web components. That does function, but obviously, we would look into supporting whatever theming Blazor is working on and stuff like that.
Yeah. So ASP.NET, so Blazor ASP.NET server side, I know is built on top of Bootstrap, so we're definitely going to be looking at Bootstrap support out of the box, and then definitely we're going to be looking at ways to make theming much easier in Blazor.
All right. So Graham, what you're saying is we could create a style sheet, and then we have to use the same CSS class names as what you're using, and then ours would just overwrite what's there rather than doing it individually on the control, right?
That would be one way to go about it, Carl. But there's sorry, generally what we're trying to do with this product is not have you have to like dig into like the web stuff directly or the CSS stuff directly unless you want to. So we're certainly looking into ways for you to do that sort of thing without having to, like, say, inject a CSS file into your site if you'd rather just stay in Blazor land. So.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. So we can just stay in Blazor land. So for now, I'll just set the individual properties and stick with whatever the default colors are.
Yeah, certainly. It's an option. Like Carl, if you you can access the beta of our web components or our released React components, and what you'll see is that there's a CSS subfolder underneath the package root in any of those npm packages. And if you look in that folder, you'll see a bunch of CSS files that represent a dark theme for the components. And yeah, you should just be able to grab the CSS is actually common to all of our web platforms for the DB components and the grid and such. So you should be able to just rip one of those out and inject that into your Blazor page, and that'll actually have the desired effect. So that's one way of going about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm working on Move to You right now.
There might just be an easier way a few months down the line. There just isn't right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, I told you a good question about the C# API wrappers of JavaScript. You see that?
Yes. Yes, we have, or certainly it's our intent to have full coverage. So like anything that you see in any of these components that we have in our Angular, React, and Web Components products, you should be able to use all of that functionality within Blazor. We actually do a lot of like boilerplate generation for our APIs, so we really have like an internal API for these components, and then we're auto-generating a lot of the aspects of the React versus Angular facades around these components. And so the Blazor is just another target there in terms of all of the API that we're generating for usage. So the idea is that everything that is supported in like the say the React product as an example should be supported in Blazor. Now, again, if you recall back at the beginning of the meeting, Brian called out that this stuff is all very early preview stuff. There could very well be plenty of things that don't work currently, because yeah, we're just kind of giving you an early view of our current status to elicit some feedback. And yeah, like we haven't brought our full testing to bear on making sure that everything we intend to be present actually is. So yeah, let us know how it goes once you've played around with it a bit. So.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I've already got a Blazor client app that I got up, and I have all of your IG data charts running in it, as well as your combo box. Are you going to be porting those over? Or if you, I would be most interested in those porting over. So I'm using client with the interrupt right now.
Yeah, so are you using the Angular product, or are you using the jQuery product, or which product are you using?
The JavaScript one, IG data chart.
Yeah, so essentially what you can expect in the first release is a good portion of our data visualization components. What you won't necessarily see in the first release is, smaller things like, these like LOB style editors and or the full grid that we have in the jQuery product there. Yeah, because so I mean, but none of that necessarily prevents you from still interoping with some of the components that we don't support in the initial release and pulling those in. But yeah, we won't have the full suite of that jQuery product supported, because one of the goals and directives here is to not have this this product be dependent on jQuery, and so yeah, we're going to be looking at moving more of the functionality into what's available in our Blazor product over time. So.
Okay.
We have a question from Tom about, can you elaborate on why C# Blazor controls are unwise?
Yeah, that's kind of its own somewhat long discussion, Tom. But let me see if I can give like the give a high level view, and then yeah, if you're interested in more detail, maybe you can ping Brian and we can have a longer discussion about it. But one of the problems is actually the current state of WebAssembly. They don't actually have the, for C#, they don't actually have the ahead of time compiler working for Mono, for the Mono compiler yet for WebAssembly. So the output WebAssembly that you get is actually rather slow because it's interpreted. And that's not going to matter much for doing application stuff, because unless you're doing like really complicated computations and stuff on the client. But it matters a lot for things like a chart, things like a grid, you know, where you're doing a lot of heavy lifting under the covers, especially in these performance scenarios where, yeah, just that interpreted runtime that they have for the Blazor stuff, or for the Mono WebAssembly stuff right now is just really not up to task for doing some of the more complicated things that we want to do. The other issue is actually boils down to that. Well, there's other performance issues related to the JS interop, right? Because the actual DOM lives in the JavaScript area of the browser, and the HTML5 canvas, where we do a lot of our 2D rendering, lives in the JavaScript portion of the browser. You start to get if you're trying to say you try to take a chart component and compile that all as C# and have it talk to the HTML5 canvas, then you're putting the place where you're doing that JavaScript interop down at the very chattiest part of your application, where you're making all of these individual rendering requests against the HTML5 canvas. So you're paying this big tax to do that interop down at the chattiest part, as opposed to, you know, where we currently have that JS interop divide is up in the least chatty part of the application, where you're actually sort of just setting a set of properties against the component. And so, there's that tax. And then, to top it all off, I just alluded to the fact that Blazor currently has this client mode where you're actually compiling all of that C# to WebAssembly and running it in the browser. But then it also has this server-side mode where there's a network request between the JavaScript land and the C# land. And if you imagine what would happen if you tried to implement a chart in such a way that the chart was running on the server, and then say you were trying to zoom a chart in, or drag draw a rectangle on the chart surface, and every interaction with your mouse was sending requests to the server, and then the server was computing what needed to be rendered, and then sending all of those render requests back to the client, you might understand why it's maybe not a great idea to try and implement all of the logic of your component as C# logic. So anyway, like a bunch of those factors are feed into the decision of like how much of the individual underlying component code is running as C# versus running in the browser. And at least at the moment, with the current state of Blazor, it's the right decision for us to have as much code running in the browser as possible. So I hope that goes towards answering your question. And but yeah, if you want to drill down into that further, you could ping Brian there, and I could give you a more discursive explanation as to some of the factors that we're taking into account with the decision as to how to break this up. And like, keep in mind that what we're trying to do is present to you an API that would look exactly the same as if we did everything as C# all the way down to the core too. So if that picture ever changes, 4 or 5 years down the road because of the WebAssembly landscape looking different, then we might have reevaluated at that point, and some of these things can change under the covers with without you being aware of what happened. So.
Well, that's amazing knowledge. A knowledge bomb dropped right there.
Yeah.
That's some great stuff.
Yeah,
Thanks,
Brian
man.
did warn you that there was engineers on the call.
Yeah, yeah. You are speaking to some of the smartest people we have, so you will get definitely an engineer talk. Any more questions? We're here for you.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
In WPF, we've built a number of custom series for unique UI. Are you going to have any capability at some point to do custom series in Blazor?
Yes, that's something that has been on our roadmap in general for the web versions of the chart for a while. It's something that that hasn't been scheduled, but yeah, definitely. It's just definitely sitting sitting in the queue there, but definitely talk to Brian about your specific requirements there, and the more people ask him about it, the more priority it's going to have in our backlog, and we'll hit it sooner than later. But yeah, it's just something where, you know, in WPF we enabled a lot of that via inheritance, and you know, just because of the structure of the API on some of these various web platforms, achieving that same thing via extension with inheritance would be not a it wouldn't be a great story, and also yeah, it was always very complex to build them that way for the WPF product, because we didn't really give you access to a lot of our utilities for making that work easier for you. So we wanted to kind of revisit how we were letting you extend these components and try to make that as easy as possible. So yeah, that's something that we've been brewing for a while, but we need to have people ask for it more urgently so that Brian and Jason can scooch it closer to the front of the queue.
Yeah, so Tom made a comment. He made a comment in chat about how our competitors are promoting the controls are all native. You know.
Yeah, that's a weird thing that they're doing there. I saw one of the articles that I think Tom is pointing out there. I think it could have been Telerik or someone had that. But yeah, it's a very weird thing that they're saying there, because based on how their say, just for example, their chart is performing in their samples, I can't imagine they're actually doing that with some of the things, some of their more complex components. You know, the example that they pointed out in the article that I assume is being referred to was a very simple component. And yeah, like if you're doing only very simple things, that, you know, you're not going to get into a lot of trouble with you know, with how that works. But yeah, I think there was a significant amount of smoke and mirrors going on in the discussion.
Yeah, I'll also add, if you look at their grid samples, they don't have any heavy data grid samples available. They all use paging.
Yeah.
The sample I just showed you had 100,000 records in it, and we were hitting ludicrous speed scrolling on it.
And, you know, Blazor is trying to help you there. You know, in case you're worried about performance in your application, like it is. So say you've got a application and you're, yeah, like Blazor is having to manipulate the DOM. So, you know, isn't Blazor having issues with a lot of this stuff being in C#? It's trying to do this stuff in as smart a way as possible. Like, you know, similar to React, if you're familiar with React, you're building a virtual DOM. You're not building actual DOM when you're writing a Blazor component, and then it differences it to try and figure out what actually got changed between one version of your component and the next, based on it sort of rendering multiple times, just based on data binding, changing, and stuff like that. And then it tries to minimize the amount of changes that it needs to notify the DOM about, and then batch that all up, and then shoot that over in one communication with JS interop layer, so that it's trying to make sure that that's there's as little chat as possible happening over that JS interop divide. So yeah, Blazor is trying to make that as efficient as possible, especially because it might be there might be this client-server divide to contend with the information being shot across, right? So it's trying to make the best of a difficult situation for you. It's just that there's a difference between the amount of manipulation that you might have on like a somewhat simple screen in your application versus the kind of things that are going on when you're yanking a scroll thumb up and down in a grid that's paging in data asynchronously, or you're sort of zooming and panning in a chart. I don't know for sure because I'm not them, but I would have to assume that, say, some of our competitors there, if you actually looked at, say, something like one of their charts, they're absolutely not using that strategy that they are claiming that they're using, in that scenario.
You see that from
it's possible to bind your Blazor controls to an iQueryable for auto paging. I mean, we haven't necessarily investigated all of these different scenarios, but what I can tell you is, say, for example, what you can do is, like some of these would depend on whether we support iQueryable in a component or not. But what I can give you is one example that we do support, right? Is like, say you've got an observable collection and you bind it to a chart, right? And then you add like add some new data to your observable collection.
Yep.
What we do is notice that data arrives and make sure that data is synchronized with the data that the chart is bound to over in JavaScript land, and that the chart will update based on that occurring. Or you've got an item that actually I don't know if this is functional quite yet, but certainly it will be. You've got an item that implements iNotify property changed, and then modify some of its properties. Then it will make sure that those modifications are synchronized with the data that's being bound against over in JavaScript land. Or you get an event saying like, hey, your mouse is over this item, and then it will report to you the C# item by the time that event is raised over in your C# code. And so like it's our intent for all of that stuff to function. This specifically about iQueryable and paging, like that's going to fall down on whether the specific component that we're using, whether we've designed it to talk to the iQueryable interface or not, which won't necessarily be the case for all of the components. But anyway, I hope that goes towards answering your question. Like certainly there are some complexities with interacting with your data, that exist using this model. But those are more pleasant problems for us to address than to try and address the problems that exist if you're, running the entire component in C# with the current state of Blazor and mono WebAssembly.
And so Harry just asked a question about our Gantt control. Yes, we are working on a Gantt control at this moment. I don't believe it will be ready by our March release. Do we know, kind of guessing Q3 maybe? Maybe, yeah. So we're targeting maybe a Q3, Q4 for the Gantt. We just started it.
And stacked column headers on the grid is on the backlog. I think it's relatively high on there, but it's not something that's there currently. It's certainly something that you could fake a bit by using our templated column headers, but it's not a built-in feature as of present.
Yeah, and I'll warn you ahead of time that our grid currently, our data grid, does not have editing. So if you try to double click on it, it doesn't have editing built in. For that, you would have to kind of create your own edit mode by maybe putting a button in a column and you click edit, and then you use a template column to put your own editors in there.
Like master detail.
Or master detail would be a great workaround for that until we can get editing in. So don't think it's broken. It's not in there. Any more questions? Any more requests? Ideas, things that you need for you to be successful in your applications? I mean, looking at this list, this aligns with things we would already plan on doing. Schedulers, tree grid, pivot grid. We have these on our other platforms, and we would definitely move these over to Blazor. I mean, we have these on Angular. We're going to probably bring these over to React, and you can expect them to see them in Blazor as well.
I think we can commit to seeing tree map pretty soon because.
Tree map?
Yeah, because.
That's the one you're working on now.
We're currently working on that on a bunch of platforms. It might even be in the bits that are already there.
Really? It might be there.
I don't think I've tried it out.
Well, hold on. Did I close that? Hold on. Let's see. Let's see if.
That might be a bad demo to try and get.
No, it's there, dude. It's there. Tree map.
I don't know if it's functional.
It's there.
I guess you can see.
Do I need what? Should I just set a width on it? Like 800 pixels?
Yeah.
Maybe, and a height?
You might need some data that it would like, though.
Oh, really? I don't think. Not pixels.
I don't. You don't really have any.
Will it render with no data?
It's not going to show you anything interesting with no data.
Well, let's see if it gives us an error when it runs.
Yeah, you can see that at least.
But look, tree map right there. Sweet. I didn't even know that one existed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hold on. Yeah, in progress. Shoot. It's in the preview, baby. Let's see if we get any errors. We'll check our console to see. That was on the radial gauge page. Let's see if it's there.
Yeah,
it's there.
looks like it's there.
So I didn't bind any data to it, but it's there.
Yeah.
Do you think if I bind any financial data to it, it'll show up?
You might get some content. It just might not look very interesting without the hierarchy. So, but yeah, you can give it a go.
Let's give it a go.
So you're going to need to bind that data against it. So set that as the data source. And then it's going to need a label member path and a value member path.
Label member path. Oh man, I don't even know. I think it's a
label would be
stock item. I think it's stock item. Label.
Yeah, so you can use label and then I guess use close as the value. Let's see what happens.
All right, let's see.
How much data is in there though?
Oh, that's a good amount.
Yeah, I mean, just like it might not want that much data.
Oh, it might be too much data?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it's a lot of data actually. And it's from multiple sources.
Yeah. All right, so bad demo maybe.
Well, hey, we'll see what happens. Yeah, nothing.
Yeah. Might not be functional yet. Either that or it's not really the kind of component that you would bind thousands of items at the same level to with similar values. It would just give you a bunch of boxes that look like they're the same size.
So my data is not a good data source. So maybe when you try this in your own apps, you can play with it and give it a better data source than what I have available.
See if it's there.
Send you an email, data. Oh, that's gonna help.
It's not C#.
It's not C#.
Okay, so it has to be.
Yeah. We're in Blazor, man. This is C#. Get rid of that JSON stuff. I don't want to see that.
Yeah.
It makes me throw up in my mouth.
Anyway, it's possible the tree map is functional. Otherwise, maybe in the next bits. So.
All right, Tolia. Is Infragistics truly excited about Blazor and fully invested in it as somewhat game-changing tech? Will this translate necessary investments and continued support and not another Silver Light? Dude, everyone got burned on Silverlight.
Well, we were pretty excited about Silverlight.
Yeah, we were. We were all in on Silverlight. We had a ton. We had Pivot Grid on Silverlight. We had Gantt control on Silverlight. Like all these controls that everyone's requesting, they were there. It was a massive, mature product, and Microsoft pulled the rug out from underneath us, and all our customers, everyone was mad about that.
I was using it when it was called WPF/E.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yep. But yeah, no, we're highly invested in Blazor now. We're hoping Microsoft is going to stick to it too. Like we're a partner with Microsoft. We interact with them often, and we're trusting they're not going to do this to us again, honestly.
Well, and I'll say, like, it's a bit of inside baseball here. We're just kind of treating this as, sort of as another head of our web products, right? So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for us to provide and maintain anything that we add to Angular, React, web components, also as Blazor, with as little maintenance overhead from our point of view as possible. We just want this to be basically automatic. Like, we're building a tree map, we're going to give it to you on all these platforms. We're building a Gantt view, we're going to give it to you on all these platforms. And so hopefully there won't be any kind of like lag or anything when we're building you something new. It'll just be there on Blazor, as soon as it's finished on any of the other platforms. So that's our goal.
Hey, Brian?
Yeah.
Do we have an org chart in the ASP family of controls?
Yeah, you can. Actually,
Yeah,
Jason,
let's get that.
Jason and I were just talking about an org chart / diagram offering.
Yeah, like we did for AppMap. We used the org chart or diagram control.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely something we were just talking about yesterday.
Okay, that would be very cool.
Yeah, so we're running short of time. Our time's almost up here. We have 3 minutes. So I just want to point out my email, blagunas@infragistics.com. And honestly, the easiest way to get me really is on Twitter, @BrianLagunas. I'm pretty responsive on Twitter. I get thousands of emails a day, so sometimes you might get lost in the weeds and it takes a while. So if you want an immediate response, just follow me on Twitter and hit me up, and you'll most likely get a response in just within 30 minutes or so if I'm not on an airplane. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you for all the suggestions. This is really going to help us, plan our backlog and our feature sets that we're going to be offering. Thanks to Graham and the whole team who showed up today to help support this effort. We're going to call it a day. Make sure that you keep an eye out on your inbox for the next office hours, because I'm trying to get another surprise for the next one. It's going to be really cool. Hopefully it works out. But every month I plan on doing an office hours on a topic of something, right? It'll be a different topic every time. And so keep an eye out, check your spam, but you will be getting another meeting invite in a few weeks. So thank you once again, and I will see you next time, everyone. Take it easy.